really grateful that you're all here. My name is Suzanne Kahn. I work as the Education Director at the Wells National Estuarine Research Reserve in Maine. And this past October, I had the amazing fortune of helping Jom Acebes with her whale research in the Western Pacific. That's how we met one another. And I'm so grateful that she has agreed to do a presentation about the whale research that she conducts in the Philippines. She is the founder and principal investigator of Babuyan.org, which is a whale and dolphin conservation nonprofit in the Philippines, and it's currently the longest running continuous cetacean research in the Philippines. So we're very fortunate to have her zooming in at 7 a.m. her time to share with all of us the work she does on whales and dolphins. So I'm gonna let you take it away, Jom.
Thank you so much. And hello, good evening, or good morning from here in the Philippines. Magandang umaga or magandang gabi sa inyong lahat. Good evening to everyone. So, yes, just to add to what Suzanne mentioned, we were so lucky to have her help us in the project for Lindblad National Geographic Society Visiting Scientist Program. It was an amazing expedition. I won't be talking about that, however, but more of the general work that we do here in the Philippines on whales and dolphins, and more specifically, the work that we've been doing on humpback whale. So I hope you'll enjoy this few minutes that I'll be sharing some stories about the Philippines and whales and dolphins here today. Yeah, so I guess we can start. Um, I guess the best way to start is to explain the title, I suppose. So I chose the title of Bancas and Coconuts because one, I think the work that we do on whales and dolphins in the Philippines is quite unique compared to other places in the world because of the boat that we use. So yes, so if you've Googled what Bancas mean, Banca is basically the, how do you say, Anglicized word for bangka. Bangka is the actual Filipino word for a type of boat that we have. So it's a general design for a boat where we have outriggers on the sides, both sides, not like in the South Pacific where you only have on one side, I believe on the right or left. I can never remember. But for us, we have outriggers on both sides, and I will show more photos of that later. Coconuts, because yes, we do have a lot of coconuts. And later on, I will show you how sometimes, especially when we have an experience or volunteers who are first timers joining us to help us on our surveys for cetaceans, that they mistake floating coconuts for dolphins sometimes. So that's why I gave that title for my talk of Bancas. So here we go. And please let me know if you don't see the slide or hear the audio. Now it's not working. Okay. So just to start, like in case, I'm sure you guys know where the Philippines is, but to make more of like an illustration on the map, like how far apart you guys are. But this one is more of trying to show where the whales are. So I will be talking about humpback whales and the humpback whales that visit the Philippines annually to breed are part of the Western North Pacific population. So they come all the way from Hawaii or Alaska and travel to the Philippines. Hawaii, yes, is also a breeding ground, but for some reason, some of them also go to the Philippines, and some of the whales that come to the Philippines also go to Hawaii. Um, So yeah, so we're on right below Taiwan, a little bit west of the Marianas, and further west from Hawaii. So in the Philippines, we do have quite a lot of whales and dolphins. We have 28 species of marine mammals, 27 cetaceans, and one Sirenian, the dugong. We don't have manatees, but the dugong is very closely related to the manatee. Looks very similar to. So like I said, these whales travel all the way across uh, the Western Pacific to come to the Philippines to breed. And so, yeah, so this is what I've been studying for a long time. But if you compare the history of work research on whales and dolphins in the Philippines, it's actually fairly recent. So there was some American whaling here in the Philippines back in the 1800s, like mid 1800s, where they basically frequented all over the waters of the Philippines. And this was actually happening while there was also coastal, local coastal whaling, but for a different species. So simultaneously, also the British were also in the Philippines doing some whaling. So if you can see here on the slide, the charts, the maps that you see are actually from Townsend, and this shows where the sperm whaling grounds were for the Americans in the Philippines. So it's practically almost everywhere. The colors only indicate the month of the year where they would come to the Philippines to hunt for sperm whales. So, but yeah, like I said, there was also local coastal whaling, but for rudis whales and Umuras whales. So these are baleen whales. Um, but that didn't really start the research. So there was hunting in the Philippines. There were a few observations that were published back in the 1960s, but it was only looking at some of the baleen whales in Palawan, which is in the southwestern part of the Philippines. And then it wasn't until Dr. Hammond and Dr. Leatherwood noted presence of dolphins in one of the big islands here in the Philippines, Cebu, by Ocean Park. So basically, they were Ocean Park in Hong Kong. They were taking animals from the Philippines and bringing it all the way to Hong Kong. And it was soon after that where there was some research conducted by our former DNR secretary. He was also he was a very prominent scientist. He passed on a few years ago, Dr. Angel Alcala. So he did some studies on the presence and utilization of dugong in Palawan, but that was only on dugong. And then after that, he basically almost, I'd say, mentored Dr. Luella Dular in the late 1980s. And she was the one who basically discovered that there was hunting for baleen whales in the Philippines. So back then, we didn't know until 1989 when Dr. Dular discovered this inadvertently when she was doing research in Bohol. So yeah, so we do have this history of hunting, but fortunately, all species of whales and dolphins are now protected in the Philippines. But she published a lot of work which led to the protection of all species of marine mammals in the Philippines. Yeah, so this is just to show you like basically what it was like back up until the 1990s, because it wasn't until 1991 and then 1992 where a law was actually passed to protect all cetaceans in the. And then from there, basically there was several workshops that were conducted. This was the very first Southeast Asian Marine Mammal Symposium. in Southeast Asia, and it was conducted here in the Philippines, Silliman University. So this is when a lot of the researchers in Southeast Asia who started work in their respective countries met to share progress on the work that they were doing on marine mammals. And that continued on until I think the last meeting we had was a while ago, but the group is still quite well and thriving. But of course, it's the younger generation now of Southeast Asian marine mammal researchers. Yeah, and we do have a field guide now, a new version of this field guide. So we're very proud of that because it's probably the first on any specific group of wildlife here in the Philippines. So what Dr. Delar started was basically increasing the interest on marine mammals in the Philippines, which is actually quite, I'd say, impressive compared to other places in Southeast Asia. We do have a big group of young, interested people to work on marine mammals in the Philippines. And we're hoping to give opportunities to all these young people, especially the students. So in terms of surveyed areas, not a lot of the areas in the Philippines have been surveyed. This list has already been outdated, but still, we still know very little about the marine mammals that we have in the Philippines. A lot of the work that we know are small areas that have been covered, as well as based on strandings as well. So just to give a background on how marine mammals are managed in the Philippines, there are two government agencies that handle it. All cetaceans are handled by our fisheries department, or what we call the BFAR, Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources, while the dugong has been separated, and it's handled by our Department of Environment and Natural Resources. Why that is, I actually don't know. It's just how they did it way back in the 80s. Okay. In terms of research, there have been quite a lot, but mainly conducted by NGOs and the academia. There's very little work that has been done by our government, but mainly NGO-led and students, individual researchers, and academic institutions. Okay. So what do we do? So Suzanne mentioned that I am part of Baliena.org. Baliena means whale in Filipino, similar in Spanish. So what we do is we basically conduct research on whales and dolphins in the Philippines. And how do we start that? So usually we begin by conducting interviews. So we interview mainly fishermen along coastal areas to find out what they've seen, what kind of marine mammals they have in their area, when they are seen, and where exactly. So this is a very important step that we do whenever we go to a new site. And then we do the exploration surveys. So as I mentioned, we do use a different type of boat or platform, and even the boats that we use come in different shapes and sizes. So here, this is quite a relatively big boat, what we would call a big boat. So several people can be standing to spot, to look for whales and dolphins. But this is basically how it looks like. We say it's a big boat, but it could be smaller. So the one on the top right is actually what a group of researchers use when doing research on Irrawaddy dolphins. The one on the bottom left is what we use for humpback whales. So all these are called bancas. It's just different sizes, from a small one to a medium one to a large. So that's what we need. So we do mainly we do some transects, but for us specifically in doing research on humpbacks, we do photo identification. So to give a little bit more of background on the humpbacks, um, in the past, people didn't know that humpbacks come to the Philippines. So we didn't even know we had humpbacks back in the early 90s. But historically, humpbacks were found close to the Philippines. So Taiwan, Hainan, Okinawa, Ogasawara, the Marianas, and the Marshall Islands. That was what was written on literature before we found out that we actually do have humpbacks. So back in 2000, when I was starting with WWF, one of my first tasks was actually my first task ever. The reason they accepted me as a volunteer was because they needed someone to verify a report that humpbacks were seen in the group of islands in the northern part of the Philippines. So I was tasked to take a group of people who have never seen a humpback whale in their life, only on photos and videos, same with me, to go to an island fairly remote and find out if are there really humpbacks there, basically. Because we only received photographs from someone who's been to the islands and saw humpback whales there. So with this group of volunteers from different backgrounds, we even had one non-Filipino with us. We set out to the islands called the Babuyan Island. So this is a group of 5 main islands on the northern part of the Philippines. Um, it's actually not that far. This is not the furthest north group of islands in the Philippines, but for some reason, it's not easy to get there. So there's not a lot of tourism, obviously, no regular boats to get there. So for you to get there, you actually have to hire a local boat to get you to one of the islands. And it takes about 4 hours to cross from the mainland to one of the closer islands. So it's quite far. So I think that's the reason why a lot of people have never been or not even heard of the island. But it is a very beautiful place. It's a volcanic group of islands with about, I'd say, 13,000 people among all the islands. This is the total population of that group of islands. But in this specific island, this photograph here, there are only about 4 to 5,000 people. So when we first set out there, this is what we basically saw. You know? So again, we were using initially a big banca to go around the different islands, and we lived with the people there. There were no facilities, no hotels, no camping grounds. So we basically lived with the Coast Guard, had their little huts on the island. And for the first week, we basically went around every single island of the Babuyan Islands. But unfortunately, we didn't see any humpbacks. We only saw dolphins. So we kept going around trying to find the humpbacks, and this was in April, which was supposed to be the time where they were there. But nothing. Just see. Until we decided to settle in one of the islands, which is Camiguin, and talk to one of the fishers to ask him about his experience of seeing whales. And while drinking by literally a fire pit, he told us that, yes, of course, I see humpbacks and I actually hear them. And the way he described that when he would go out fishing at night, that he would hear this like very mysterious bellowing sound coming from the sea, perfectly described a humpback song. So he even described it as it sounds like a cow singing underwater, really loud. So the next day, he said, okay, he took us on his boat, a small fishing boat, and we went a few kilometers out from shore. He turned off the engine, and in a few minutes, we actually heard the song of a humpback? I don't know.
John, we can't hear it. I wonder if you need to press that button again that we did. And we're not getting any sound. Oh, there it is. There it is.
So that's what, for me, that was the very first time I heard humpback sing. So you can just imagine the excitement of both, especially for us. Never heard of humpback sing before. So yeah, and yes, after that, the rest is history. For some reason, we started seeing humpback whales, and we continued going around the islands, but mainly around this and started the boat humpback whales. Now it doesn't. Okay. So yeah, so that basically started the WWF-Philippines Humpback Whale Research and Conservation Project, which we decided to continue. When their funding ended, we decided to continue the work. And that's how basically we formed Baliana.org. So yeah, so our Suzanne briefly mentioned that our main mission is to conserve cetaceans in the Philippines and their natural habitats. And we do this mainly through research, but also through educational outreach and conservation work, working closely with the people who live in the communities where we find whales and dolphins. So as I mentioned earlier, we do mainly photo identification for the humpback whales. Again, just to show you another one of the boats that we have used in the past, on the lower left hand of the slide, that's also another boat that we used to use. So this is a medium-sized boat that we consider. Apart from doing photo ID, we also do analysis on the songs, like the one that you heard. But for this, we collaborate with researchers from the US, actually. So we work closely with Whale Trust. They're based in Hawaii. And there, Dr. Jim Darling does all the analysis for us for the humpback songs, comparing that across the Western Pacific, Western North Pacific. We also used to do biopsy samples. We don't do that anymore. It's just a lot more complicated for us. But we hope to restart it because we still know very little about the whales that do come here. And we still also do a little bit of the threats analysis. There are some threats to cetaceans in general on the island, but not as much as it was maybe 10 or 15 years ago. So that's quite good, actually. To share a little bit more of what we do know now about the humpback whales that come to the Philippines. As I mentioned, it's part of this population in the Western North Pacific. It's still considered actually endangered because their population is distinct and they only have an estimated population of about 1,000 whales. So that's not a lot compared to other populations of humpbacks around the world. And in the Philippines, we have over 250 individuals in our catalog. And we've had matches with Japan, so Okinawa and Ogasawara. So based on the matches that we've had with Japan, it actually shows that we just basically share the same small population of whales. So their whales move sometimes come to the Philippines. Our whales sometimes go there. So we basically have the same whales. So it's a lot of matches. So it really shows that. But as I mentioned earlier, we have had matches with Hawaii as well. What's going on there, we don't know, but they do travel that far, all the way to Hawaii. In terms of the feeding grounds, the humpbacks that come here feed in mainly in the Russian Far East, but we've also had matches with Alaska, only a few. So majority do feed in the Russian Far East, Kamchatka and Chukotka. How many whales do we see on the island? We have an average of about 100 humpback whale sightings per season, and maybe 28 individuals that we photo ID every season. That's not a lot compared to places like Hawaii. But we're still working on the effort, meaning just trying to spend more time out in the water with them. And the newest is we actually have the record holder in terms of the humpback whales that the humpback whale that has traveled furthest. So we have one match with Mexico. So this particular whale, the one in the photo top left, traveled more than 12,000 kilometers, and that's only the straight distance. Obviously, they wouldn't do that. They would travel along the coast. So maybe it decided it wanted a different view because Mexico is also a breeding ground. So somehow it decided probably when it was feeding in Russia or Alaska, decided to go all the way down to your coast in California, all the way to Baja in Mexico. And it was seen there. So again, we don't know why they do this, but they do. Humpbacks are kind of quite travelers. They're big travelers, I'd say. In terms of songs, as I mentioned, we've had this collaboration with Whale Trust, and they've done great work in terms of comparing songs from Japan, Hawaii, Mexico, just to see similarities in the songs. And we do have very similar songs, even if it changes every season. The change is quite similar. But of course, the closer we are together, the place, the more similar the songs are. We've also studied other things like the skin lesions, like you see the photo here on the bottom left. It's a whale with all these little nodules. Again, this is one of the mysteries in the humpback whale world. This is not unique to the Philippines. It's also been seen in Hawaii and in Japan and other places, but still nobody knows what's causing it. We still are monitoring this, and hopefully someday someone's going to find out what's actually causing. New initiatives. So we're very excited for this season because for the first time, through a collaboration with the Hawaii National Humpback Whale Sanctuary, from with Dr. Mark Lammers, we were able to deploy an ecological acoustic recorder. So basically, it's like a underwater sound recorder, which we deployed underwater in one of the islands in the Babuyan Islands. And this will help us determine when the whales actually arrive and when they leave, because we actually don't know yet. Because whenever we go to the islands, it's already almost the middle of the breeding season. So although the locals have some idea when they first arrive, it would be very good to know exactly when. If it's the same as in Hawaii or Japan, we will find out hopefully soon. So we deployed this in December, and we hope to retrieve it in May and find out when they come and when they. And again, we have a bigger collaboration now among not just the breeding grounds in the Pacific, but also the feeding grounds. And we're comparing song. So all these different groups across the Pacific are simultaneously doing recordings, at least for the breeding grounds. And then in the coming summer, the researchers in Alaska and other feeding grounds will be doing the same. Actually, they already started last season. But for us, this is our first season to start the recording and see what we find out about humpback song. I don't know how much time I have, but just a few more slides, I suppose. Yeah, are we okay? Okay. So apart from the Humpback Whale Project in the Babuyan Islands, Baliana.org also has a project in the Bohol Sea. So that's the star here on the lower, slightly right of the map of the Philippines. And we also have other projects, but smaller ones that we sort of like, more of like a pop-up activity in other places around the country. But to give you a little bit more information about our other site, which is in the Bohol Sea, so this is a map of the area. We also do research there, but on a different type of whale, this time for the blue whale. So we do have, well, at least one blue whale in the Philippines in terms of photo ID. So this is the whale we've named Bughao. Bughao is blue in Filipino. So that's why people started calling him Bughao, because he's the only blue whale that we photo identified. But what's special with this whale is we've seen him for 13 different seasons. So he does come back. It's just that it's very unpredictable. And he's, well, I'm saying he, but we actually don't know if Bughao is male or female. We don't know what this whale is doing in the Bohol Sea, if it's feeding, if it's breeding, or both. And we actually don't know if this whale lives in the Bohol Sea or he is also migrating. So we know very little. So this is a fairly new project, which we have now combined with another project. If you remember, I mentioned that we have this history of whaling. This is actually the area where they used to hunt whales, but not blue whales, but Bryde's whales and Umura's whales, which are smaller. And so now they seem to have come back. So there are more and more sightings of Bryde's and Umura's whale, which is very exciting for us because, as I said, in the past they were hunted. So now that they're coming back, it's a very good sign. So we've combined that with the blue whale. So whenever we go on surveys in the Bohol Sea, we also search for this other species of baleen. Other cetacean projects that are going on, not ours, but my colleagues, are for Irrawaddy dolphins and also the other smaller cetaceans also in the Bohol Sea. And then this is aside from the other surveys on Irrawaddy and other cetaceans, there's also a survey that's going on the Indo-Pacific Balanoso. It's in the Tanyon Strait. This is another area in the southern part of the Philippines. And then apart from that, we also help conduct trainings, and we also respond to marine mammal strandings around the country. We do get quite a lot every year. And yeah, one of my favorite, apart from doing surveys, one of my favorite activities is doing this educational outreach in the communities where we work. So we usually go around the different communities where there are schools, elementary and secondary schools, and we teach kids not just about whales and dolphins, but about the entire marine ecosystem, and teaching them on how to protect it, what they can do to keep it clean, and other things. We also do more capacity building for communities. For example, we do training on enforcement, what we would call enforcement. So we, apart from working with the Coast Guard, the Maritime Police, we teach the local, in Filipino we call it Bantay Dagat, which literally means guardians of the sea. So we have bantay dagat, so we train them on how to monitor their area, and how to enforce the law. But we also have certain activities for communities, like groups of women, like what you can see in the photograph here on the bottom. Um, we partnered with this amazing woman, Zerlina. She's from Hong Kong. She's a good friend of mine. And she teaches women how to sew little plush toys of different marine animals, depending on the area. For example, here in Bohol, she was teaching them how to make the one on the bottom left. Um, she was teaching actually here in Babuyan how to make humpback whale. There are better photographs towards the end, but on the photo on the right, she was also teaching the women how to make manta ray plushie. So she sort of chooses an iconic species in a community where she teaches them, and then it basically adds to their. It's not an alternative, but it's a supplemental type of livelihood. So it helps empower women so that they can add more to the income of their family. So she teaches them how to make them and allows them to sell it. And sometimes we also at Baliana buy from them, and then we sell it for our fundraising. So in a way, we're trying to help add to the income of the uh, family of the women who take part in this activity. We also do some work on marine protected area management, not just conducting trainings on how to manage it or do monitoring, but also to install um, buoys or signages for marine protected areas. And then we also have like a small scholarship program. We help young people from the islands because there is no college or university on the islands. So we support interested students who really need support to get to college on the mainland because it costs a lot of money. So we support their tuition and also their living accommodations on the mainland so that they could finish a university. So far, we've had 3 scholars. They've all graduated, and we're hoping, yeah, we're hoping to get new students for the coming school. Yeah, but we do have challenges, obviously. Mainly funding, irregular short-term funding, but this is a problem for everybody, not just us. And there is some lack of government support when it comes to marine mammals. It's not exactly the priority of our government. And then I mentioned earlier that there is no specific marine mammal project supported by the government. And I guess the saddest part is that there is always this disconnect with development and conservation. So as an example, maybe we're lucky in the Babuyan Islands, it's not as bad, but in some areas, like for example, the area where Irrawaddy dolphins are found and they are critically endangered, is that they're developing a bridge in the core habitat of these dolphins. So it's a continuous battle. It hasn't, luckily, the bridge construction hasn't started, but we fear that it will happen despite all protests from different groups. Yeah, and it's, yeah, like I said, it's happening all over the country. We do fear that somehow it will eventually reach the areas where we work, like Bohol and Babuyan, but hopefully not. But yeah, cross fingers. So these are some of the threats to marine mammals in the Philippines in general. So of course, the most how do you say, common problem is degradation of their habitats. Dynamite and cyanide fishing is not as much as it was maybe 20 years ago, which is good. But there is an increase in black sand mine. and it really destroys habitats, not just for the cetacean, but for it really affects fisheries in general and unregulated coastal development. There's a lot of construction that's going on in many of the coastal areas around the country and not necessarily following guidelines. There is some disturbance when it comes to boat traffic, but definitely not as bad as some areas in the US. I guess we're lucky in a way, but we do have one or two cases that we've actually obvious where there is some injury that was caused or even it was fatal, like this photo on the top right. It's a photograph of a large whale. We later identified this as sperm whale, I believe, where you can clearly see it has like huge propeller cut wound all along the tail and would probably cause its death. And in some areas, there is increasing tourism, which disturbs these animals, especially the dolphins, resident dolphins. And of course, there's always this risk of entanglement or capture in fishing gear. We've had several cases in the past 5 years of cetaceans ingesting marine debris. Not just plastics, but also discarded fishing nets, but mainly plastic, different types. So it definitely is an increasing problem. But we do have a lot of opportunities. We get young, eager volunteers from all over the country, all over the world, wanting to join us because we do call for volunteers to join our surveys. Hopefully, Suzanne can join us in one of these surveys in the coming years. But yeah, we're open to volunteers from all over the world to come help us do our surveys. And these are the plushies I was talking about. So the middle and the left photo, these are examples of the little toy plushies that we sell for fundraising, and these were all made by the women in the communities where we work. We do have other merchandise, like shirts, and this is usually how we raise funds. So apart from that, we also do a lot of for the volunteer, for example, it's also not just getting people to learn more about cetacean research, but also it's our way of getting donations to contribute to the research that we have. So the volunteers that we have, it's basically a paying volunteer program. So they pay their way to join us, and then they help us do the research as well. So these are all part of our fundraising, apart from the merchandise. So how you can help, you can volunteer for us one of these days during the season, obviously. We do have another survey coming up. Our humpback season, unfortunately, is already ongoing, but we will be having our survey in the Bohol Sea in May, and we will be posting a call for volunteers soon. Do follow us on social media. If you are on social media, we're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We're not on TikTok yet. And that's probably it. Thank you very much. Maraming salamat.
Thank you, Jom. So interesting. I think I have some questions, and I know there was at least one in the chat. Let me see here. Yes, from Gary. When you were playing the humpback song, he wonders if the humpbacks heard at the Babuyan Islands, if that one humpback was only active at night.
Oh no, they actually sing day and night. They don't really choose to sing only at night. Like for example, I mentioned we do the recordings using hydrophone. So that, of course, we only do during the day. But yes, the fishermen actually mainly hear them at night. I think it's also because it's more quiet in the evening. So they don't need a hydrophone like us. So when it's quiet and they're out fishing at night, they really hear the from the surface of the water. Actually, we sometimes hear that as well when the waters are really calm, even before dropping the hydrophone. When the singer is very, very close to our boat, you can hear it from the surface. So it's that loud. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yes.
Let's
Yeah, we don't have a
see.
lot of tour boats going around, so that's an advantage. I guess if you guys have been to Maui, for example, that's the big difference. Like, yeah, it's if there are any boats, it's small fishing boats. But again, it's not a lot of fishing, just a few. So it's very fairly quiet.
Jom, there's another question here from Karen. She says, "Thank you, Jom. This was fantastic. Though humpbacks travel great distances, oops, I wonder if it's balanced between the sexes. And even if females travel a lot, do they have sight fidelity when giving birth?"
It's a very good question, or several questions. And yes, actually, when I said that we have matches with Japan, like Okinawa and Ogasawara, many of our matches are actually male, if we do know their sex. Because again, we don't do a lot of the biopsy sampling. Actually, Japan does. So they're more advanced. So meaning when they've identified their whale, they usually also know if it's male or female because they're able to take a small tissue sample. But since we do share a lot of these whales, then they help us when it comes to that, if that whale has been seen. So, yes, many of the whales that travel between Philippines and Japan are males. But there is sight fidelity. We did the comparison between Philippines, Ogasawara, and Okinawa, and we found that what we would call what do you say, like within region, sight fidelity is very high. So many of our whales come back almost every season. But at the same time, we also have very high inter-regional fidelity. So the whales that we share with Okinawa or Ogasawara are almost the same whales that keep moving back and forth between our two countries. But the interesting thing is, yes, the whales that sometimes move within the same season between Philippines and Okinawa are males. So, for example, there's one whale which we call PH. It's boring because we have them as numbers, but some of them do have names. So, like PH004, for example, was seen in March in the Philippines. And then 2 weeks later, they saw it in Okinawa. So they traveled that far within the same season. And the reason for that, at least scientists think, and this is based on studies in other parts of the world, and it does make sense. The reason why males do this is because to increase their chances of being able to mate with a female. So they travel. So maybe they look in the Philippines, spend a few weeks here, and if they're okay, I'm tired of the females here, I go to Okinawa and find other females. So it's increasing their chances of being able to breed. So that's why they travel, spend all that energy just to go somewhere else and find another. So yeah, so females, we don't have a record actually of a female traveling within the same season to other um, breeding grounds because they want to spend all their energy either giving birth and nurturing their calves, their young, while in the breeding program. So they spend more time within the Philippines, actually, or in Okinawa as well. So once they're there, they stay there, until they have to move back. Yeah.
Thank you.
Let's see, we have a couple other questions from Gary. When determining matches between countries/locations, is the matching based on physical characteristics captured in photos, or are there other characteristics used to determine matching?
It's actually based on physical characteristics, but mainly the fluke. I'm trying to find the slide here. So humpbacks we're lucky that we're studying humpbacks because I'd say they're probably the easiest to study here. So the photo here is actually a whale that we've seen here in the Philippines, and we found a match with Russia. So it's a unique. Each whale has a unique. So here, just to show, each whale has a unique pattern in their fluke. So this whale in this photo on the top that matched with Mexico, it's been seen in Mexico, is very, very different from the one I showed you, this one.
Mm.
So it's like a fingerprint. So if we humans can be identified by our unique fingerprint pattern, humpbacks can be identified by the unique pattern in their fluke. Some of them have varying degrees of white. Some are completely black. So that's harder to identify. So we use I don't know if you guys can see my cursor, but it's the serrations. So if it's completely black, we rely on the serrations of the fluke. They're also unique. Yeah. So it's that is the main physical characteristic that we look at to be able to compare. So we send each other fluke photos. But now I don't know if you've heard the one I mentioned here on the slide, happy whale. It's actually I'd say, I guess it's an AI. It's an AI developed by a guy from California, Ted Cheeseman. And it's amazing because it basically, it's a huge breakthrough when it comes to humpback whale work because anyone can participate. Just send in, you register you as a participant, and then you can send your fluke photos of humpback whales, and within minutes, sometimes seconds, you find out where that whale has been seen around the world.
It's amazing.
Yeah. So he changed our lives completely because before we do manually, we have to look at each photograph in our catalog, compare it. But now you just send it to that website, and the AI will just find it. So if there's a match, where it was seen, when it was seen last, and you can even talk or communicate with the people who have seen that whale, and find out more about the whale that you've seen. So it's amazing. Happy.
Jom, do you know what the website is in case people are interested?
Oh, hold on. I can't.
And while you're looking, the other question in the chat is, do individual whales have individual sound signatures or songs?
So humpback whales are different compared to dolphins because I'm sure some of you know that dolphins have unique calls. They even said that it's their name. No? So that's how some dolphins call each other, by their unique names. Humpbacks, they sing a different song every season. I put in the chat box the link to Happy Whale. What was I saying? Yeah. So humpbacks, they sing the same song during the season as a population. I'll go back to that slide. to give you some idea of what I here. So if you look at the different pie charts, but it's not really a chart, the different colors represent a theme in a unit, a unit in a song. So this shows you that P is for Philippines, J is Japan, H is Hawaii, M is Mexico. So during 2001, all humpbacks in the Philippines were singing this kind of song.
Hmm.
And all humpbacks in Japan are singing this. But there are some similarities. So different populations would be singing different songs. But all the humpbacks in that population are singing the same song.
It's a chorus.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, but there are similarities. So if you look across this, you'll see that all the songs in the different countries have the same unit, right? They all have the green, they all have the blue, the red, the orange, the yellow, but it's just they sing it they combine it in a different way somehow, but it's still quite similar. But you see that, for example, Philippines and Japan is more similar compared to Philippines and Mexico. And it makes sense because they're far apart. How they do this, again, it's still a mystery, but the most logical explanation is they hear each other, right? So they eventually kind of copy each other. So that's how they end up singing the same song, but only within the season. So like for example, the song that we're hearing this season, that's going to be different from next season. So they will change it. Why they change it, we also don't know. So yeah.
Thank you.
I hope that answers that.
Let's see, there's a couple of questions from Letitia, who said this was so inspiring and fascinating. Thank you for all you do. I will spread the word about the group and soulmates. Is there a way to get the list of threats? I was writing them, but not sure I got them all.
Oh.
And Letitia is also wondering, might the skin lesions be caused by pollutants or chemicals? I was wondering the same thing.
Yeah, it's a good question about what's causing the lesions, no? There are actually several possible reasons that scientists are thinking of. The first one actually is not pollution, but yes, definitely that could be a factor. But one was, at first they were thinking it was some kind of viral infection. Because in smaller cetaceans, in dolphins, there are certain diseases that cause some sort of skin lesion, and it's a virus that's causing it. Or they also thought, you know how humpbacks get a lot of cookie cutter shark bites? You know, those little sharks with the round, they cause these round wounds on the humpback. Some scientists think it's also possible that it's an infection of that bite. So if they, you know how some people have allergic reaction to insect bites? So they're saying, why not? It's also possible. Because if you look at, so the lesions is actually close to, the white ones are actually the cookie cutter shark bite scars. So that's why they're thinking it's possible that maybe these whales have some sort of reaction when they get a lot of cookie cutter shark bites. Whether it's fatal or not, we actually also don't know, because there has not been a case of a stranding of a humpback where it has a lot of these lesions and it's been tested or analyzed. That's why researchers still don't know what's causing it, because no one has had the chance to take an actual sample of that lesion and examine it closely. Yeah, the other one, so it's viral or bacterial infection because of the wound. And yes, maybe pollutants also could be causing it. The other one is they're thinking it might be sexually transmitted, because in many of the whales where we see this, it's near the genital area. So this actually photo shows you that well. So this is where the genital slit of the humpback is, and many of the lesions are found in that area. So that's another hypothesis. But yeah, nobody knows for sure. Yeah. So I hope that answers the threats. Oh, there. But this is mostly in the Philippines. In other places, there are other threats. Yes. So this is the first one that I guess the main threat to marine mammals in the Philippines. But increasingly, marine debris definitely is a problem. I think all over Southeast Asia or even the world, I'd say.